Stop and think about your life for a second. Just think about it. And let's just talk about moments, if you will, just moments, moments that change everything. And I get it. Everything changes something, no matter what you do, it's going to send you it's going to just be different for you. But those moments that are just radical change, just radical change. I think about my own life personally. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I ended up in Columbus, Ohio from a tiny town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan because I met a girl one summer who was going to Ohio State and she convinced me to apply. That was sort of a moment. Now, I probably would have gone to law school somewhere, so that wasn't huge. But I think about my father, who was the son of immigrants from Croatia, and they immigrated to Chicago, Croatian neighborhood. Um, the whole family lived on the whole on the street, same street. And my grandfather got a job with the Chicago Transit Authority. Uncles who worked for Chicago Police Department or Chicago Fire Department. Um, and that was kind of the path that everybody was on. My dad graduated high school. For some odd reason, he graduated in December. I have to ask him the story. He graduated in December and was headed back to the high school for some odd reason and ran into a teacher who said, "What are you going to be doing?" It was a science teacher. And the science teacher said, you need to go talk to this professor at Beloit College, which is 90 minutes northwest of Chicago, which is not a hard trip at this point in time with the turnpike, with the interstates. But in the early 50s, it was, you had to take a train, took a train everywhere. Went up there, visited with the professor. 3 days later, enrolled in his freshman year, which started in January, and that was his moment. And he, developed this love of learning. Got a degree, got a master's degree. Met my mom. That was part of the equation. Got a PhD and became a professor. And it's just those moments that just change everything. So today, I am got on with me here, uh, Genevieve Paturo, and she's got a story. Um, she was kind of a a corporate jockey, if you will. I mean, she was headed down the corporate path, and she had a moment, and that moment really sort of changed everything and continues to change things. Um, and so, Jen, I want you to kind of share your moment, share your story, um, if you
Thank you,
will.
Frank. Sure. I'd be happy to. It did and does, as you say, continue to change the way I live and hopefully it touches other lives. But I was that corporate VP marketing in the television business in New York City. I wanted that more than anything because a traditional Italian daughter was groomed to get married and have kids, but I wanted to follow the Mary Richards of Mary Tyler Moore fame and be that single woman with adventures in a big city in the television business. And I did that for 12 years. And it was a wonderful, thrilling, workaholic life for a single woman living there. And I was aiming for that top floor, that corner office, as were many of my female colleagues. And one day, the first moment of two I want to tell you about was an internal moment that surprised me. I was sitting quietly in my apartment and I heard a voice in me. And if no one can see me, I am pointing to my heart because that's where it came from. I heard a voice ask me, if this is the next 30 years of your life, is this enough? And Frank, that shocked me
Mm.
because in an instant, I understood in 30 more years, I would be alone. I would have nice things, but what was I really doing but just scrambling for fame or success or status the way I thought it was?
Now,
So,
was it like a scared shock?
yes, because it was a voice I'd never paid
Okay.
attention to. I won't say,
Okay.
I think we all have voices we ignore. We
Sure.
listen to
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
our head, and that voice is very familiar to me. But this voice was quiet but clear, and it came from a different place, and it took me a while to understand. that we all have that heart voice. So in the next instant, I remembered seeing the police and social workers on a news segment taking children out of a very harmful home. And they took them to a shelter. And I wanted to know where those children were going. I just felt their fear and their hurt. And I called the police station in New York and I asked them, where do you take these children? And they gave me a little education on emergency shelters and a few of the names. And I called and I asked if I could come and read to the children at night. Now, I was led, I followed, I was guided there. There's a whole other conversation there. So I went in my business suit. They showed me to a room that was bare. I sat on the floor with my bag of children's books, and I see little faces at the door. And they came in so afraid. I could see on their faces, they'd been crying, a lot of them. Their clothes were tight and soiled. My heart was breaking one, two, three as they came in. A dozen sat down with me on the floor, and they were quiet, and I read for 45 minutes. This happened 2 or 3 times a week because I couldn't get enough. I was falling in love with these children and wanting to find a way to ease their pain and comfort them. And one night after I read to them, they were taking them over to another room where they were going to sleep. And I wanted to follow and peer and see. And what I saw was another heartbreaking picture. And they were huddled together, sometimes more than one on a cot or a surface, crying, some of them. And then they were in the same clothes. And I had this vision, these flashbacks of my mom sitting at the edge of my bed and my sister and my brothers, and how beautiful and loving it was. And I had never thought of that moment for 30 years. And here I am with these flashbacks of what my mother gave us and the fun and the love and the comfort. And of course, we had our choice to pick a pair of pajamas we wanted to wear. And for some reason, as the staff walked me to the door that night, I turned and said, can I bring pajamas for the children next time? Again, Frank, I don't know why that came to my mind. As I tell you now, I wonder where, but that's what I asked. And they said, that'd be lovely. No one thinks of that. So when I brought pajamas the next week and I finished reading to the children that were there that night, I started giving out pajamas. And there was one little girl who was so afraid of me. I don't know what she'd been through, but it made her afraid of strangers or of me. And she kept backing away, shaking her head. She wouldn't take anything from me. And I had a pair on my shoulder the entire evening, giving them to the other children. And I waited. And she was alone in the end because she was watching me. I went over to her, standing with her caretaker. And I knelt down and I tried to show her the pajamas. I said, you want to feel them? They're so soft. You can wear them even tomorrow. I bet it'll be okay. You don't have to give them back. They're yours to keep. They have pink, just like your shirt. Don't you want your pajamas? And she leaned in and she whispered, what are pajamas?
Mm.
And that was the question that changed everything. I mean, I was so glad I was kneeling because I think I would have fallen over. I had to take control of myself because I didn't want her to see that she upset me. And I explained pajamas to a little girl. And that was the day that changed everything inside out, from my heart out.
I mean, that's powerful. Now, you left corporate America. It wasn't an abrupt sort of a thing, or maybe. What was kind of that transition?
It was very disruptive because everything in my body and heart and soul was saying, run from that. Run from the corporate world. What were you doing? Look what you can touch lives. These little children need love, and that's what it's about. And I couldn't, I had a mortgage and I had so much, and I just didn't know how. I knew nothing about how I would eat if I jumped. I was single. I was alone. I couldn't fathom how to do it. And I kept leaving work early and I kept making up excuses. I kept coming into the office with a suitcase saying I was going away, but it was filled with pajamas and books because I was going to make a quick getaway to the shelters every night. And it was exhausting and it was frightening because I knew my bosses noticed something was different and I didn't dare tell them what I was doing. I practiced it. How do you say to someone, listen, I went to a shelter. I read to these groups, and a little girl asked me what are pajamas, and now all I want to do is give pajamas to all these children and read them stories and make sure that they know somebody cares about them. And it sounded ridiculous because I had no answers to. I knew what questions would be asked of me, and I actually tried. 6 months in of running myself ragged. In my book, I say, leave juggling to the clowns, because I was doing that, and I felt the balls dropping. So I gathered up the courage to invite a girlfriend who was also climbing the ladder, but not in my business, asked her to have a drink with me, and we did. I had 2 glasses of wine. I got up the courage and I said, literally what I said to you, Frank. Listen, I had this idea. I went to a shelter. I read to children. I told her the story, and this little girl asked me what pajamas were. And now I find myself obsessed running to shelters, and I really want to quit. I don't know what to do. And she looked at me with every with the expression I feared, and she said, "Are you kidding me?" She said, did you forget you have a mortgage? You've worked 12 years. You're on your way. Can't you do that on Saturday afternoon? And my heart dropped because she didn't get it, and I don't know why. I thought she might. And it was another 6 months before I opened my mouth and tried again. And I was just making a mess financially, everything. I made a mess of my life and my job, but I did have to go to part-time and then project work. And then I made the jump. But, we all need a cheerleader. We all need someone. And I finally met a man that I was starting to date. And I said, I better tell him, because he thinks, that I'm on my way and we're going to have a happy life if we stay together, 2 incomes. And I got up the courage, and I was prepared to lose him. And I said the same thing I said to my friend, and he looked at me and he said, I think you should go for it. That that was another moment that I took a breath, and I almost said, marry me.
Yeah.
I did
No.
marry him. I
Okay,
did.
good. Good. Well, good. I was going to say you better have.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
So
well, before we
yeah.
hit record, you said you like Hallmark stories. That's a Hallmark story right there.
Oh, well, it is a love story. It's about heart,
Yeah.
and I talk about it all the time. Leaders need heart and moxie. And I know I had moxie. I learned that word, and I know that that's one of my favorite words. And I found my heart big time, and I learned about moxie, and I think that those are two I teach now, heart and moxie. I teach how to be a voice that moves the world, because find purpose, trust people. That's how Pajama Program, which is 24 years old, 40 chapters around the US, 8 million plus counting pajamas and books to children, and reading centers in several states. I left the executive director role, passed the baton to a board member, president of a board, who wanted to leave law to follow
Yeah.
my lead here. And now I teach, because it changes everything, as you know, Frank. A moment changes everything, and people will feel what you feel. There are people out there who will feel the same and want to support and help and make that impact.
Yeah. My head is swimming with lots of questions. Who underwrote all the purchase of all these pajamas? I assume you,
Can you
right?
see my hand is raised?
Yeah, I can. Well, I'm sure that's not, I mean, I'm sure you're not buying the most expensive pajamas out there, and
No, no,
you're trying to, and nor do these kids necessarily want them or need
no.
them.
But they had to be new.
Right.
These children don't get
Sure.
anything new.
Yep.
Books
Uh,
too, new.
yep. And so
At the beginning, of course, over the
sure.
years, wonderful, wonderful, companies and individuals have rallied, and we could never have been, this
So what
successful.
was that
Thank
moment
God.
where you're like, okay, I'm going to start reaching out to people? I mean, because you went into your bosses and you said, hey, I'm doing this. Were were they moved at all and like, hey, this is great. Can we help you? Or
I never told them, and they don't know.
oh,
They've never
oh,
reached out. It's a
oh,
very
okay.
different. Yeah, I mean, I talk about the difference between the bosses I had,
Yeah,
and I was a boss. I hope I was a leader. I still
yeah,
connect with people that worked with me, that where I was their quote boss, but I tried to be a leader. But I learned the difference, believe me, through leading and hiring and working through everything, all the challenges to grow Pajama Program for 20 years, I learned leadership the way that felt right to me. And thankfully, I see all of us finding our heart and, balancing it with our moxie. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's different.
Well, no, and I completely understand it because I worked in public accounting, Big Six public accounting, and it's I didn't have a pajama moment like you had, but I had that entrepreneurial push, and people didn't understand it. Right? You're going to walk away from all of this, and they wanted you just to be, we really want you to try and make it to partner because if you made partner, you did very well for them. And even if you didn't make partner, you were doing very well for them. And that's really what they understood is align your life. If you need a spouse, if you need those things to help align your life, but you align your life towards serving an entity, serving your own self-interest. Um, and, they didn't get what I was trying to do.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess it's a little of the golden handcuffs, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, I'm very frugal. I tell my wife if I didn't marry her, I'd still be living in that dumpy little apartment, eating raviolis out of a can.
Yeah, yeah.
I was
I tell
totally,
people, right.
totally content.
Yeah,
I don't need a house. This is great.
yeah. Me too. I
Just,
wasn't a saver. I just figured, oh, there's room on the credit card. Okay, keep going shopping for those pajamas and those books. And yeah, yeah.
yeah. So they never knew. So you never went back to them. I mean, ultimately, how did you tap into people to start underwriting this? And I mean, obviously there are people out there, but you weren't running in those circles. It didn't sound like.
No, I was not running in those circles. And when I started, I knew, and there's a phrase, ladies who lunch, and you see it in The Blind Side, one of my favorite movies. It gets me every time because I saw those teenagers. Um, but she goes to lunch and she tells them her project and they're all writing checks. And I would laugh, before I saw that movie because that phrase in New York City is popular, ladies who lunch. And I didn't have any of those friends, I didn't, and I
Yeah,
didn't know how I would do it. But it was the moxie. I was calling strangers, and it was a little bit of a different world. I don't think we had LinkedIn. I didn't use that. I would call people, and I
yeah,
would just I came to understand the more I put my heart out there, which I was afraid to do. I would tell my husband, I can't tell people because I cry every time I tell them about that little girl, and they're not going to, want to work with me. I can't control my emotions. And he said, that's why they're going to want to work with you.
yeah,
And he was right, and he is right to this day. I speak on the stage and I cry most times about one of the stories I tell, or about so many things that are still so raw in me about what I've seen and the leaders I've met who resonated with that little girl's pain. That's what I felt, and that's what people feel. And it's not like I'm asking for $1 million. I'm asking for, some new pajamas and new books. Of course, that turns into people saying, well, here's a nice check. What can you do with it? But I'm also as happy, to take the pajamas and the books. And, now that Jamie's running it as executive director, she feels the same. It's wanting people to feel that they are part of a beautiful impact, a beautiful voice that moves the world.
yeah. Now, I guess let's fast forward. Um, you've written books. You were on the Oprah show. Um, I guess fill us in on all the things that have happened between now. You stepped away from the organization, and now you're kind of the director emeritus, I guess would be the term.
I'm the
Uh,
founder. I like that.
well, okay, all right, good.
Now that's, yeah.
I guess fill us in on the books and the different things that you've done and where this is where the moment has taken you.
Well, all through the 20 years I was executive director, I would speak because we were raising money, and I would meet people and I'd meet the volunteers, and I was hiring staff, and they'd want to know the story. And I realized that more and more people were coming into my office closing the door behind them, sitting down and confessing that they did not want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, anything. They really wanted to be a dancer, um, a teacher, and they were afraid to jump midway. And because I had, they felt that they had, an ear, and they did. And I felt their trust, and I felt that I could help people by giving them a little of my moxie, see if I could rub off on them, and promising that I would be their cheerleader through it and support them any way I could. And I loved that because it makes such a difference in people to do what they know they're meant to do. And so many of us went down a road that our parents wanted us to, or that was easy and it was already a paved road. And that was important to get it. It was important to get a job that you could keep until retirement. All
Yeah.
those things that thankfully are going by the wayside, and people are listening to their heart voice. And so I was doing that, and I would tell them the downs as well as the ups, the obstacles, and how much trouble I got into, and the challenges and what I did wrong. And that's also was very appreciated by people because they knew they weren't just going to get a syrupy, oh, just jump, it's going to be fine. You'll see.
Yeah.
So I wrote the book, Purpose, Passion, and Pajamas. And it's how to transform your life, embrace the human connection, because that's our tool,
Hmm.
and lead with meaning. And that gives heart of the matter lessons at the end of every chapter about life and leadership. And then after the pandemic, which was a life-threatening condition for all of us, people were really looking to make an impact and give back. And even people who had full-time jobs wanted to start a nonprofit or do some. So I quickly wrote, Purpose, Passion, and Moxie, how to start and run a nonprofit from scratch to success. And I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of so much good that's coming from such a horrific time.
And I think you said there are 40 chapters, or was it 24?
Yeah,
40.
no, 40. Yeah, 40 plus. Yeah.
Okay, here's a question. Where do you want the next chapter to be? Or where do you want the next chapter to be? Or who should we be looking for that, and maybe it's not hard, how do these things come into being? I don't know. I just,
People people hear about um if people hear my story, or if people are reading something or listening to something, um, they'll either look up pajama program and see all
mhm,
about what's going on. And if there's interest in their city or their state and they don't see a chapter, or they want to be in touch, they can learn all that through pajama program. And I'm happy to make an introduction. And then they'll ask me to speak on, you know, the lessons I've learned, or the heart of the matter lessons, or something like that. So there's something they can do on the nonprofit side, and then something they can do on what I teach about leadership and how to be a voice that moves the world. And I coach people of both nonprofit people
yeah.
and leaders.
Well, I mean, I guess in my mind, everything can be rooted through you. So if somebody is interested in learning more about, geez, I'm sick of being an attorney, and there are a lot of attorneys, accountants, whatnot, who are sick of being those things. Let me just back up. You had talked about, hey, if you make this leap, you're going to have these challenges, right?
Mhm,
If you don't make this leap, you're going to have these challenges. We have challenges in life. That's just,
mhm,
there's no easy path. There's nothing that says that if you just stayed on your corporate path, that it would have turned out exactly how you wanted. You could have lost it all in a merger or a downsizing or a boss that doesn't like you or whatever. So
Yeah, the pandemic changed everything for a lot of people who thought
yeah,
they were going to retire with a gold watch.
yeah. Best way to get a hold of you is through GenevievePaturo.com.
Yes.
Okay, I'll get that in the show notes. I really
Thank you.
appreciate you coming on today. This has been great.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for letting me share.